There. My name is Jerome Cisco, and I am coming to you today live from beautiful Wisconsin. Northern Wisconsin, temperatures are 25 below zero. I come to you from northern Wisconsin, where today it is about 10 below zero, and I want to show you the sugar shack that manufactured. And I am just a hobbyist. I'm not a full production type of guy, and we enjoy it. It's making your own maple syrup is self-satisfying, a lot of work, but it sure is worth it. So dating back to my days back in northern Wisconsin on the dairy farm, my parents and siblings, we all gathered together, and every springtime we would go out in the woods, tap maybe 25, 30 maple trees, and then we would take and fill up the buckets, basically 5-gallon buckets, and then haul them back over to the back end of our 1953 Willys Jeep truck. There we would pour it into old milk cans. So one thing about being out in the woods is you do a lot of tripping. The snow is high, and there's branches and twigs and etc. that you trip over, ice, but it's the challenge behind it. But once we accomplished that, getting it back in the 53 Willys Jeep truck, we would bring it over to the farm and then pour it into like a 15-gallon pan, and the pan sits on top of an old wood cook stove. And that old wood cook stove, we would heat it up with your assortment of different firewoods, and we would have to let that boil down to a certain point. And once we got to that point, then we'd bring it inside in smaller containers, like a stock pot. And once we had it in a stock pot, then we'd boil it down, and we did not have any hydrometers or any tools like that to measure sugar consistency. We basically went off the color and the thickness of what we preferred. So we'd boil it after that into good old mason jars with the lids, and then let the bottles seal themselves. And that was basically the process of our growing up on the farm with it. Well, 25 years ago, set on a little adventure with the children, and they wanted to tap some trees to see what that was like. So we went out, tapped, 5, 10 trees, and we boiled all the sap inside in the house. Now that's a long process and using a lot of electricity. So time went on, we found some scrap metal and enclosures, if you will, and we made our own boiling unit. And that boiling unit, of course, stoked it with firewood and maybe a 20-gallon sap pan, and we would boil it outside, and then the finished product would bring back inside. Well, as time went on, we had more trees that we tapped, and more trees, I would say maybe 100 to 150. And boiling the sap outside in this cold weather and high winds, the snow and etc. was just, it was miserable. We would be out in the wide open, kind of like you see right here, and it just took forever to get a good boil on the maple sap. So we decided to build a nice little sugar shack, as you can see in the background here. And this little sugar shack, 12 by 20 structure, and it is pretty much everything we need. We still boil into a 45-gallon sap pan, and our production is of sap boiled per hour. I mean, it has increased drastically having it inside of an enclosure or a sap shack like you see here. So for all you enthusiasts out there, hobbyists, and you don't want to spend a lot of money putting forth into a sugar shack, As you know, you could buy the maple syrup off the shelf in the grocery stores, but this Sugar Shack here, I would estimate, cost about $1,300 to $1,400 in materials and some time on your own schedule. A little bit of sweat put into it, but the end thing is, or I should say the end result is, that you get your own maple syrup, and it's a wonderful, wonderful process. So for all of you out there that are interested, as you can see, it turned out really nice, and I want to say that this beats boiling maple sap outside in the cold when it's days are 20 degrees at night, and yes, the sap flows in when it's 35, 40 degrees, and etc. So the thing about it is, maple syrup for me is a wonderful, wonderful complement, if you will, to pancakes, waffles, French toast. You can even put on top ice cream and coffee. But my favorite topping is pancakes or French toast, peanut butter on top. I would just put some of that maple syrup over the top of that and enjoy every bit of it. Well, stay tuned for the ride that you're about to go on, see how the manufacture or fabrication of this building took place. Until then, well, happy sapping, happy syruping, whatever it might be. And the structure right here, I forgot to mention, like I said, it was about $1,300, $1,400 to fabricate and manufacture. As you can see on there, it's a lot of galvanized old tin that I took off from an old lean-to on a barn over at the farm. Electric power poles that I used. Inside the wood that we used there were from old road signs. So those were 4x6s. Windows were new. I did get some new lumber and etc. But you can really keep your costs down low if you find the used materials and willing to work with it. Here, I'll just give you a little visual walk around of the Sugar Shack. As you can see that, as I mentioned, a lot of materials were used, and even the materials on top on the vents up there, if you want to call it a cupola or whatever, that opens up so the steam goes out. That was all wood that I got from work that was going to go into the dumpster. So yeah, reuse the materials that you can find, and you can make yourself a really, really, really nice Sugar Shack. One that you can stay in and stay warm while you're stoking it. Maybe have some friends over or family and just talk and have some fun. For years before we built the Sugar Shack, we used to boil the sap outside. And as you can see, a lot of snow out there. There's a lot of blowing wind, and temperatures of cold weather did not give you a good boil on your maple sap. And it was decided to move on and do something different and build a maple sugar shack. There are several methods out there that you can search for to determine how to truly square up the poles that you are putting into the ground, and pick the method that best fits for you. And once you do have all the holes dug, and just a reminder, up in northern Wisconsin, we do have plenty of rocks that are under the surface that you have to deal with, and so that might throw some things off in your process of digging the holes. But sooner or later you will get to the point where all the locations will be true and square. Once the holes are dug, then I frame up by using some supports of boards going down and keeping the pole straight and making sure everything is true and square. The poles are set into place 48 to 50 inches deep to help from frost and heaving of the poles coming up from the ground. And then also we'll put concrete in there down in the base to retain the poles in place. Also, it does help structurally wise and from the frost heaving. I used 4-inch by 6-inch green treated timbers from old road signs that were discarded and used those for the main structure. And in the front, where the overhang is, 4-foot overhang, I used old electrical power poles that were discarded once the power company installed new poles, and we were able to get those used ones for other projects. We did also have to fill in the floor, or I should say the bottom where we dug down. So the basin there is about 8 inches deep of gravel. And then to make sure we had a nice solid base for our foundation to walk around on. And before I truly squared up the whole structure, I did place the boiler unit in there because otherwise I would not be able to get that in the building. Well, I could, but it took a lot of manpower to do. But I used the tractor with the end loader to place the boiler unit inside the sugar shack. And then I continued the process of framing up the building, as you can see in the photos. I did take some time out from building the sugar shack to locate some used tin or galvanized tin that I could put on the sugar shack. And a couple of the photos there, you see that there's some tin from an old lean-to, which is from the farm. And I spent some time taking or removing I would say probably 60, 70 nails per sheet of tin to remove off of the old windbreak. And then it just took time to get the tin off and then use that in the process of tinning the sugar shack. So that kept the cost down low. I did have to purchase a little extra used tin elsewhere, but I did save a lot of. Spent a little time designing the size of the cupola for the steam to vent out through the building. And as you can see in the diagrams I have sketched out, I decided to build the cupola in the shop and then go off the dimensions I have in place there and built it on the ground instead of elevating myself and others from on top of the building to build it that way. You got to be pretty accurate on your dimensions, but as you can see through the steps that it did turn out as snug as a bug in a rug. Once the cupola is installed on top of the sugar shack, then we installed the tin on top. Please be very careful when doing that. And while we were installing the tin, we sealed off with the silicone sealant around the cupola and then any old nail holes from the old tin so it would not leak inside of the building. I continued on the process of installing the rest of the boards horizontally to the structure, strengthening it up, and then installing the angled boards would serve as your rafters, and then your linear roof boards that would hold the tin in place in the future and offer support from snow load and wind and etc. Be sure to be careful when working around the power tools. I did use a variety of different tools on this job, from a cordless drill to chainsaws, levels, of course, tape measures, ladders. You want to make sure your ladders are positioned correctly and that you don't have anything underneath that's going to cause a fall. And just be careful with everything that you're doing. The door itself is made out of rough cut pine boards. We had some of these boards over at the old farmstead for many years, and so we got some boards there and measured the rough opening of the door of the sugar shack, and then built the door down in my basement and installed it, and turned out really, really nice. Be careful when cutting the tin. You do get little flares of like burrs popping up that can easily cut your hands if you're not wearing any gloves. Even if you are wearing gloves, it can poke right through there. But we did use a skill saw with the blade reversed to cut the tin, very noisy, and to get a lot of shards that do fly out of there. So safety glasses are a must. I did step up to buying a cordless tin snips, powered that way, and it made the job a lot easier. So I just continued on with the process after getting the roof completed, and then, as you can see in the photos, that re-tinned, or I should say applied the tin to all the sides and the windows installed, and the structure is looking pretty decent. Once the exterior of the sugar shack was completed, then decided to go inside the sugar shack and level off the boiler unit. And once the boiler unit was leveled off, then we installed the black stovepipe. And I did install it's called an insulated stovepipe going through the building wall and outside to another black stovepipe going vertically up above the roof line. Further in the photos, you will see where I installed the heat barriers, which was old tin, and then I used old fencing insulators as in between the wood and the tin. That way it keeps the heat away from the combustible materials of your wood, and you have a safe boiling system there to retain the heat, and that it doesn't cause any fires in the building structure, and etc. Needed to add lights to the inside of the building, and instead of running underground wiring electrical from the house out to the sugar shack, we opted to use a 12-volt system, basically a 12-volt battery, to a couple light switches, and then some lights stationed inside the sugar shack with 12-volt light bulbs. They're LEDs that we purchased online, and it did provide a lot of light for that structure. Thank you for following us on YouTube and our manufacturer of the old Sugar Shack, Maple Syrup Sugar Shack. For more information, see the email attached. Thank you.